Welcome to the Boswell Book Company virtual event series. It is day 4,480 of us being in business, and we are so honored to welcome back virtually Katherine Addison, the author of The Witness for the Dead. The Witness for the Dead is a companion novel to The Goblin Emperor, which won a Locus Award. It's been getting raves everywhere, including this from John Scalzi, who said, "I've been wanting to return to the world of the Goblin Emperor from the moment I finished the book, and The Witness for the Dead does not disappoint. At once intimate and literally operatic, it's everything I love about Katherine Addison's writing in ways I didn't know to expect. I loved it!" Exclamation point. Katherine Addison is also the author of Angel of the Crows, and as Sarah Monette, she is the author of the Doctrine of Labyrinth series and co-author with Elizabeth Fair of the, and here's where the pronunciation goes askew, Iskreen series. Her short fiction has been selected by the year's best fantasy and horror and the year's best science fiction. We are so honored tonight for Katherine Addison to be in conversation with Jim Higgins, the arts and books editor of the Milwaukee Journal Sentinel, author in his own right, and a huge Katherine Addison and Sarah Monette fan. I can't imagine a better pairing worldwide for this author. Let me welcome you both and deliver the screen to Jim Higgins. Thank you for joining us.
Thanks, Daniel. That was kind of Johnny Carson-esque there with the swing. So, well, I am a really big Katherine Addison / Sarah Monette fan, so it's my honor to do this tonight. And welcome back to Milwaukee, Katherine.
Thank you.
As Daniel mentioned, Sarah wrote a book called The Goblin Emperor, a really remarkable fantasy novel, and now she's come around with The Witness for the Dead, which I'm sure gave Desiree and the people at Tor a challenge in how to label and market a book that's in the same world, but not a sequel. So that's what they said, because they're smart people at Tor. Before we get rolling, Katherine, would you be interested in reading a couple paragraphs?
Sure.
Just to give us a flavor of your wonderful prose that I love for its flow in this book. So.
Thank you. This is a page and a half from early on in the chapter 1. It was dusk when I got home. The lamplighters were finishing their rounds, their long poles bobbing on their shoulders. Merchants were locking the grills of their shops, apprentices and younger sons assiduously sweeping the pavement. In the courtyard of my building, the women were taking down the laundry that had been hanging on the lines to dry all afternoon. They smiled and bobbed their heads at me shyly. I nodded in return. No one wanted to be too friendly with the Witness for the Dead. I've stopped in the concierge's office to check the post. I had a letter, cheap paper, and cheap sealing wax, and I recognized the hand. I climbed the stairs to my apartment, the iron banisters sun warm beneath my palm. One of the local cats was on the landing, his white paws tucked up neatly beneath him, his cream and red tabby swirls making him look like a glazed marmalade bun. He said, "Meow," to me as I unlocked my door and stood up to stretch. By the time I came back out, he had been joined by 2 of his sister wives and a half-grown Tom who wasn't old enough yet to be chased away. A third sister wife lurked halfway up the next flight of stairs, too shy to come all the way down to the landing while I was there. 9 bright blue eyes watched me. The deeply sabled queen had suffered some injury that left her right eye cataracted and blind. As I set down the little saucers, each with a fourth of the can of sardines I had just opened. And this is my own helping. I sat in my doorway and watched them eat, amused by how each cat guarded its plate so fiercely from the other 3. And the third queen, a dark brown tabby who was probably the biggest of the 5 of them, watched and waited, one eye seemingly always on me. None of them was entirely tame, but that one had been hurt before. I had not named them. Names were too much power given far too easily to animals who wandered the city and returned to my landing only when they felt like it. I did not give them names any more than I let them in. When the half-blind queen had finished with her sardines, she came over and bumped my shin gently with her head. I rubbed behind her sail-like ears, and she began purring, a deep throbbing noise like the engines of a airship, excuse me, wrong genre. The other cats ignored us and disappeared one by one as they finished their sardines. Presently, the half-blind queen closed her jaws very gently around my hand to tell me she was done. I watched her go, small and self-possessed, down the stairs, and then went back inside so that the third queen could come down and finish off the remains of the sardines.
Thank you. And we're going to come back to the subject of names later on in this discussion, but it's so nice and convenient for your cat to make an appearance during the scene. So Katherine, what made you decide to come back to the world that you first created in the Goblin Emperor?
Well, I wanted to write a story that did in a fantasy world what Raymond Chandler does with Los Angeles in the Philip Marlowe novels. And this world seemed like it was well suited to what I wanted to do. And I knew I had enough room because the Goblin Emperor shows so little of it, really, that I had enough space to do the things I wanted to do.
And did you know right away that and forgive my pronunciations, your names to me are kind of like the names in Russian novels. I look at them and I hope that I recognize them when they come back again. And it takes me a little while. So Celehar, am I getting that right? Celehar. Did you know it was going to be Celehar who had a role to play in the first book?
I did not know that when I wrote the first book, but it was really obvious when I was thinking about detective novels that clearly a witness for the dead would be a detective in a lot of ways.
One thing I love about the new book is that it really opens up the whole world of how this, as you rightly point out, Goblin Emperor is a very closed little hothouse society of imperial people and the people connected to them. And here our detective takes us everywhere in the city where he is. And this seems, the way you describe it, like a very old world. How old is the place where he's working in this novel?
It is well over 1,000 years old. It is, I think, the city itself may be a little younger than 2,000 years, but there have been people living in the region of the river and the lake for 2,500 years, something like that.
When you were creating a world in a place that old, did you have any real world models in mind? Were you drawing on real world places at all?
A little bit. When I was when I just had graduated from college, I spent 6 weeks in Greece doing the summer program of the American School of Classical Studies in Athens. So I learned 6 weeks worth of archaeology. And definitely, I think that always, the way that Athens in particular is built on top of the older layers of the city, and how the excavation of what was downtown Athens thousands of years ago is still in downtown Athens.
Yeah. Maybe that had a little effect on some of the mortuary work that goes on, that there are prelates who are always transferring bones to, I guess to not columbaria, but to new cubby holes, so there's more room for more dead people.
Yep.
Now, it's Amalo, is that how I pronounce it?
Yes,
Amalo. It kind of seems to be a hard city to find your way around in, like my hometown of Pittsburgh before there was GPS, because there's some humor here in the giving of directions and the getting of directions on how to go places. Did you make a map? Or how did you figure out where everything was, Catherine?
I did in fact make a map. It's not 100% accurate, and it's very large. So, but yes, I did work out where a lot of the places were before I started having my characters give each other directions there. But that was partly sort of a joke at my own expense.
And they don't seem to have invented the numbering system yet, because it's a lot of the way, like our family used to give directions, you know, make a right turn at the Red Robin and look for the green shutters. And one of our attendees tonight wants to know, will there be a map of Amala?
I don't know.
Maybe if you check out Catherine's Patreon once in a while, you'll see if she puts one up there. So
yeah, my map is too big for a scanner, so I don't know, but that could happen.
Yeah. Okay. I have been pushing your book very enthusiastically on my friends in the opera world, and your detective has several mysteries to investigate in this book, and I'm trying not to give any spoilers here, but one is the death of an opera singer, and it takes him into the world of an opera house and opera company. Are you an opera person yourself? Is that an art form you're interested in?
It is an art form I admire a great deal. My father is a diehard opera fan, so I listened to a lot of opera growing up, and certainly went to see operas when I was a kid. So I wanted, well, I'd made up opera singers for the Goblin Emperor, just because that seemed like the sort of thing that would appear at an imperial court, would be an opera singer. But then when I started to write this book, I thought, oh, wait a minute. If I have opera singers, I have to have opera.
I wonder if one of those operas you went to as a kid was Tosca.
Yes.
And if listeners out there, if you know Tosca, I think you may recognize something in this story. What are some of the other fictional advantages of setting part of your book in an opera world?
It lets me make up operas, which is endlessly fun. And it is a way to get a very some very different aspects of the society showing up in the same place. So you have the people who come to watch the opera, and you have the people who perform the opera, and the people who are taking tickets in the front. And these are all, you know, different sort of slices of society in Amalo, but all in one place.
And this country in general seems to be opera crazed.
Yeah.
We hear of several other, we hear of the big opera company, and other towns have an opera. And
Yep. Opera is the major art form.
Yeah.
They don't seem to have very many spoken plays. It's all musical.
And we even get kind of a proto-Marxist opera here, where the workers attempt to rise up against the barons. Now, for folks who are coming new to your book, Celehar is is a cleric. He's a priest in a polytheistic society. And he serves Euless. Like, you know, Euless is the god of death, dreams, the moon, some other stuff.
Yep.
Can you explain a little bit how religion works in the society? And if there is a number, how many gods and goddesses there are? Because I was having a little trouble figuring that out. Or is this like the Greek world where they're uncountable?
There are, what did I do? There are 5 principal gods. The god of the sun, the goddess of the earth, the goddess of waters, the god of death, and the moon. And then a 5th one, who I think that's Orshan, who's the goddess of the crops. But there are also dozens and dozens of other gods, some with very large followings, some with very small followings. And then some, there are, Celehar says there are hero cults and mysteries. And we don't know very much about those.
Before we get to another question, I was having trouble figuring this out. As a priest of the Euless cult, how does he relate to the other gods? Because he seems to respect them. I see a man who is respectful of really all the traditions he encounters, except for the tradition of the heretic who doesn't believe in anything. But we won't spoil that secret. But he seems to be very respectful of the other traditions, including the point where he makes a pilgrimage to one of their sites.
Yes. Oh, he believes in all of them, and not his immediate superior, because that's Vernazar, who is the Ulyssathala, but Vernazar's superior, who is the Amalathala, is actually technically a priest of all 5. So you have priests who don't specialize, but who mostly therefore are busy running the church. And then you have priests who have chosen each a god and who serve that god in particular. It is a complicated system.
Well, he's a complicated man, like they say about Shaft. So as a witness for the dead, it seems to me that's a 2-part role. One is that he is a sort of detective, or even in a way guardian ad litem for people who have died, who represents the interest of someone who has died. And he's also a very special kind of psychic who, and please correct me if I get this wrong, Katherine, when he touches the remains of very recently deceased, he picks up sense impressions or energy impressions, not so much reading a mind, but like their last embers of their consciousness. And he works these 2 things together to solve the mysteries that he's involved in.
Yes, that is pretty much how I see it.
Yeah. So is that psychic power, is that a gift, or is that cultivated through training?
A little bit of both. You have to have the inborn ability to do it, but many people who might have it will go their entire lives without knowing that they do, because it takes specific kinds of circumstances and training in order to make it manifest.
And I love imagining when you get the financing for the movie version of this book, how dramatically he's often going up to people and saying, "I'm Celehar, witness for the dead," and seeing the reactions, because his presence, maybe it's the opposite of putting people at ease. His presence and his role stirs people up in this society.
It makes everyone a little uncomfortable, yes.
And like a good noir hero, he has his own burdens, and it would be unfair to spoil the big one, but what a hint for readers is that I don't know that I've ever encountered a character who faced such a difficult conflict between love and duty, and it still weighs on him. It weighs on him intensely in this story. But he's so scrupulous in the performance of his duties, and he is a man who always has time for someone who calls on him spiritually. There's a line I want you to react to if you're willing, and he talks to someone at one point in the story about because of an event in his past, he considered abandoning his vocation, but he found that he wasn't able to, and that he was really felt compelled to continue with his work. And he prays regularly, but he says, "I no longer believed it mattered whether you listened to me. What was important was that I had to listen to him."
Mm-hmm. Ulysses is not a very comfortable god. He's the god of death and mirrors and the moon and dreams. And I think that the how do I want to say that? But it's a elvish religion is in some ways more like Roman religion than it is like any of the modern religions, where it's a social function as much as it is a personally held belief. But also, Ulysses in particular is a god who demands very intense belief from his followers. So.
Yes, he has a hard master, but he serves him faithfully. So there's so much in this book about the rituals attending death, that people have to be buried in exactly the proper way. The threat of ghouls, if certain requirements of burial aren't met, and what happened in this world that death is so important?
Well, this is a very, as we were saying earlier, this is a very old society. And I think that that's one of the things that has happened in this society as the years accrete, and more and more more and more of the society becomes somehow connected with the dead. And then, of course, you have the ghouls, who are a northern scourge, and make it absolutely vital that you pay your respects to the dead properly, or they come back and start eating people.
You have said before that at heart you are a horror writer.
Yep.
And you get a chance to do. I'm not the most sophisticated horror fan in the world, but you get a chance to do that in a number of places in this book. And so as a writer, what appeals to you about telling stories of horror?
Partly I don't know how to answer that, because it's something that's something innate in my brain that sort of is attracted to the morbid and the frightening. And one of the things that I enjoy about horror is the way that it has it's a different perspective on what a story is for. Many genres are sort of defined by what happens in the mysteries by there is a mystery and there is someone who will solve it. And Westerns take place in the Old West. And romances will have a romance. But horror is less about a thing that happens than it is about the sort of attitude that the story has. I think actually it's said best by a SF critic whose name is John Clute, who says that in horror, the story is the revelation that the world is a lie. And that's, I think, what draws me to it.
So were you the kind of kid that stayed up late reading scary books and watching scary shows?
Yep. Yeah. Yep. Guilty as charged.
And can you still find things that scare you today in stories?
Yes. I can't watch horror movies much as I love them, because every stupid camera trick that any horror movie ever pulls, and I know it's a camera trick and I know it's coming and I know exactly what it is, and it still just terrifies me. So yes.
I'm exactly the same way. I think there's some kind of sensory overload that happens, and I can't talk myself out of it. It's just it's limbic or something.
Yeah.
And Celehar has that happen to him during his ordeal, that
Yes.
he can see certain things coming, but he can't stop himself from just being freaked out to the bones, because
Yes.
as smart as he is, as spiritual as he is, he's still. So is horror a great leveler?
I think so. I mean, it's something that not all horror stories will work on all people.
Yeah.
But pretty much that basic reaction that the horror writer is going for is a reaction that puts us all in the same place as, you know, a kid reading scary stories after dark.
Yeah. The flesh-eating monsters will hit a pretty wide band of people of many demographics. So
yes,
good choice there. You also said in writing this book, you discovered that writing mysteries is hard.
yes.
What was hard for you about the mystery element of Witness?
Well, I made a mistake, which I have not made again yet, which is that I started writing before I knew who the murderer was. And so I had all the clues. I had all of the body and the clues about who she is and where she's from and all of these things, but I didn't know who had killed her. And this became really problematic about 3/4 of the way through the book, when I actually had to stop and say, no, really, who killed this woman? And at that point, it was very difficult to answer. It's easier if you do it all at the start.
So not to spoil things, but the beautiful intertwining that you accomplish at the end wasn't figured out in advance before you started?
No.
You're good with a needle, Katherine. You made that all work together really nicely.
Thank you.
I think over at TV Tropes, the website that tracks tropes in stories, I think they would refer to the singer who gets killed as the blank hole victim kind of character, because she's a nasty piece of work, but it makes her a fascinating character who steps to track along the way. So one thing about both Witness and The Angel of the Crows, your book last year, which is in a Sherlock Holmes-ish sort of world, and nothing to do with this world, is they both have a very powerful preoccupation with the power of names.
Mhm.
And so I wanted to ask you what names mean to you. These two very different books are both crucially involved with the power of names and the privilege that a name signifies.
Yeah. Names are where I start for all of my stories. That I have to know the character's name before I can write about them. And it has to be the right name, because if I'm wrong about that, I'll get stuck and have to go back and figure out all over again. Now, what is this person named? So names are just something about the way my brain does creative work, is that it starts with names and it sort of hangs on to the names. I know names before I know anything else. Maya, I knew his name before I knew that he was the fourth son of an emperor. But everything, really everything in the Goblin Emperor, and thus in this book as well, comes from the start of, okay, I have someone named Maya. What does the language have to be like to give him this name? Because I knew it was a male character. Okay, so the language, male names end in A. What else can I figure out about the world based on that? And with the second character, whose name is Cetharus, and it took me a long time to figure out Cetharus's name. All sorts of mumbling to myself and writing things on scrap pieces of paper. But then I had two names, and two names together was the start of a story.
Wow. And there you, for all of us who grew up with Romance languages, you subverted our whole linguistic thing by making male characters have A.
Yep.
You like to mess with us on gender issues, Catherine. I've seen that in both of these books. So
yes.
So do you have naming conventions for these characters, or is it really a matter of you're there at your desk with those cats pondering the name of each individual character that you write about?
In the Goblin Emperor and the Witness for the Dead, there are naming conventions.
Yeah.
Male names end with A or IS or ET. U is unisex, so either side. And then women's names end with O or AN. And I'm forgetting the third one. But so there are specific endings,
yes,
for male and female. And there are certain ways that letter combinations that do and don't happen. The letter F does not exist in this language. That sound isn't there. The letter itself, but also the sound, is not a part of the language of the Elflands and Barajan.
yeah.
So,
and in a very traditional society, I imagine these characters can learn a lot from each other just by hearing a person's name. Either they're picking up things about origin or status, and yeah, that you mentioned Elvish reminds me to bring this up. So in the Goblin Emperor, we saw a world where you have two races. You have the elves, who are pale colored, and the goblins, who are darker. And in that world, in the world of the court, the elves are supreme, and Maya's challenge is being a biracial young man. He encounters a lot of prejudice along the way.
Yep.
So out here in the sticks, or out here in Milwaukee, the Milwaukee of this universe, there seems to be a lot more integration of the two races, but everyone's still really conscious of what people are. I noticed that of Celehar. He always notices right away, oh, this person is Elvish. This person has a mix of features, but the ears are Elvish. This person is goblin heavy, and And I guess for me, superficially I see those as white and black. I'm sure it's not 100% mapped there, but is this world in a slow process of changing and the courts catching up last?
Yes, there was a gold rush in the mountains, not Amalo itself, but off a little bit to the west. The gold rush about 1,000 years ago, and so a lot of 100 years ago, not 1,000. And a lot of goblins came north from Barajan for the gold, and then discovered that they could make their livings other ways, and so they stayed. So that there has been a process of integration going on slowly in the north part in the northern part of the Elflands, which of course is the farthest part from Barajan, because that makes sense.
Yeah. But it's still a case where at the Opera House, it's kind of like a rite of spring type scandal that we're creating an opera about goblins and having a goblin diva sing a part. So but yet it must be hard to be an elf where every emotion you feel shows in your ears, and that sounds like an involuntary thing here, that people can't control that.
Not entirely. I think it's sort of like sort of an autonomic thing, like breathing, where you can control your breathing if you think about it carefully. But if you aren't thinking about it carefully, you go on breathing.
Yeah. All right, since we've been talking about names, I'm curious, and they teach us to save the rude questions later in the interviews. But okay, now that you've written 3 books as Katherine, and your earlier books as Sarah, every book is different. But are there differences in aggregate between the Katherine books and the Sarah books? Do you feel like a different personality writing as Katherine?
No, I don't. The Goblin Emperor was going to be my next book, regardless of what name I wrote it under.
Yeah.
I do think there's a difference. I mean, inevitably, I'm 15 years older.
Sure.
There's a difference between what I write now and what I was writing when I was writing as Sarah Monette. But it's not a difference that says these books are one and these books are the other. Just that things change as you age.
Well, you moved up to the top of the alphabetically organized shelves now. So
yes.
Another thing that's really important in this world is tea.
Yes.
He is obsessed with tea, and if I knew more about tea, you probably have some secret code to what all these different teas are. Do you? Is there a secret code to what the teas are?
No, I made them up.
Well, you got to get on the phone to Celestial Seasons and get a line of these things, because he's so specific about his teas, and tea houses are so crucial in this novel. Did they not discover coffee in the Elflands? They
don't have coffee. No.
Wow, this really is an alternative universe then.
Yes. But yeah, the tea houses are like the coffee houses of, say, Enlightenment London.
Yeah.
Where you go, it's where to talk and gossip and play Bach, which is like chess.
Yeah.
Or Pak Pilar, which is like poker. But a lot of your living actually takes place in the tea house rather than at home. I mean, Celehar, for instance, has no kitchen.
Right.
So,
and these are crowded cities, and people with very modest incomes, need places to socialize and have business meetings. And like a good mobster, he sits with his back against the wall, so no one can get the draw on him when he goes somewhere. Did you have a favorite secondary character in this book, or someone who you really got interested in after you got rolling?
I'm very fond of Iana Pelthenier, but I'm also very fond of Celehar's friend Honora, who is so often so often finds himself being the voice of sanity and reason.
And a wonderful one he is. He's the one who tells Celehar that, well, I can see that because you really don't care much about your life, do you? He's the friend who will speak the truth to him.
Yes.
And the first guy you mentioned is the opera.
Composer and director.
Good. And I hope it's not a spoiler to mention that Celehar is gay, and that there is a wonderful line in this book with another character about, is he just a friendly person? Is this an overture of friendship, or is there maybe a little something more? And that's a wonderful thread in this story. So I have to tell you that I love the airship girl. and if you want to take suggestions on, future stories, I'd love to read her stories.
Yes, John Hadron was a lot of fun to write.
And we should remind people that, like the Goblin Emperor, Witness is also a steampunk novel. It's a mystery, it's a horror story, it's a fantasy, and it's steampunk too, because we have airships and an airship factory and
Yep.
And an industrial accident. And
Yep.
All right, bear with me 1 second.
Sure.
You were just plowing through my list of questions for you, Katherine. You were totally on your game today. So, did you know what Celehar's burden was going to be coming into this book?
Yes, because that's how he ended up at.
How he got semi-banished out here to Milwaukee. Yeah.
Yes. No, I did know, because that was part of why he was in the court when he was in the court when Maya needed him.
Yeah. So what is the next book we're going to see from you?
The next book is currently called The Grief of Stones. It is a sequel to The Witness for the Dead.
A sequel?
A sequel.
So you're not making the tour people jump through hoops about how to label this one?
Nope. This one is for real, as a sequel.
I will look forward to that. So is this a new line for you now? Or is it one at a time, strictly one at a time in books? We're not going to have a whole series of Celehar mystery books, or is that unknown?
I don't think so, because honestly, if you have a character who can speak to the dead, making up mysteries is really, really hard. And I think I'm out.
Very good. I have a few questions in the chat for you here.
Okay.
One.
Having assistance.
Good. It's good to get assistance. Crystal would like to know, how do you organize so much complexity into a story on paper? That's the day job, right?
Yes, that's also a good question. I don't know. I think it doesn't. Well, I have notebooks and I write everything down, I guess is the simple answer.
Is there an outline? I hate to bring up that hoary old question. Is there an outline you're following?
No. I sometimes wish I was a writer who could work to an outline, but I've never had any success doing that. It's all make it up as you go along.
That's challenging with mysteries.
Yes.
Anne says that Cetharus makes her think of Harry Potter.
Okay.
Here's another reader's in commenting on the tea houses, like ancient Rome, where most people could not cook in their apartments.
Yes.
Teresa ratifies Ayana and Honora as the best. So she's ready for some opera and a visit to the mortuary bone department. Another reader said the time in the tea house is kind of reminded me of the coffee house scenes in My Name is Red. And you know, Greek and Turkish antiquity, they're not terribly far apart. That was Asia Minor back then. So I could definitely see that. Aaron says a sequel, yay. So Aaron will pre-order your book.
Good.
Sure. All right. Another reader says, reminds me of Emma Bull's Finder.
Okay.
Can you read fiction while you're writing your books?
I have a lot of trouble reading fiction since I finished my PhD. It's like it burned something out. So I read a lot of history and I read a lot of true crime, but fiction I don't read so much anymore.
So you still have the narrative impulse.
Yep. And I could certainly, I have read novels in the past mumblecough years, and I have enjoyed them very much, but it takes a lot of work.
Yeah. To return to the horror thought again, what were some of the formative horror novels for you?
Let's see. Early Stephen King, especially It, but also The Shining and Christine. Dracula, actually the Bram Stoker's finest, which I read as a teenager and was terrified by. Who are the others? Peter Straub, his early work, especially Coco.
A good Milwaukee native, Peter Straub.
Yeah.
We're going to give him a shout out here. So
Yes.
How did you feel about the new movie versions of it?
I have not watched the new versions. The first attempt to make it a miniseries was just really dreadfully bad. And I haven't had the courage to look at it again.
Crystal makes a good comment, and it reminds me of something I wanted to ask you about. Your characters are deeply lovable. Thank you. Is it hard to juxtapose the horror with such sweet people?
No.
Because Crystal, she's a very mean person. She likes doing that too.
Yes, I'm a terrible human being. But I mean, Celehar, I don't know if Celehar finds the horror stories he finds himself in horrifying, because he has kind of seen it all.
Her question reminds me that I've been thinking about both Maya and Celehar as they're spiritual people, they're religious people.
Mm-hmm.
It's so rare to encounter quality, unironic religious characters in, I mean, they're out there, but it's more rare these days to find those in fiction, you know, whose spiritual life is treated with dignity by the writer, and but not saccharine either. And it's one of the things to me that makes your stories unique, is that element of their existence. And what you believe or don't believe is not my business, but is that a subject of fascination for you, or was it simply that's who that character is?
It was something when I started writing The Goblin Emperor. I said, I'm going to take religion seriously. I don't know if the gods are real in this world. I don't know. I have no idea. But the people's belief is real. And I wanted to, like you say, treat religious belief with dignity in service of a fantasy story.
And our discussions of Roman and Greek, really their religion in a way is like the civic religion of Rome and Greece. It's as much about the practice of it as about an interior experience. Or I think certainly Maya has interior experience.
Yes.
My friend Dean, who is here tonight, any thoughts about a sequel to The Angel of the Crows?
I think The Angel of the Crows was a one-trick pony, because I put everything in there. There's nothing left.
So those of us who are shipping really hard for Doyle and Crow are just going to have to do it on our own time.
Yep.
But we know that you're a fan of fan fiction, so in our private notebooks we can have at it if we want.
Yes.
Oh, Aaron defends you from my, I hope, humorous attacks on your moral character. You are not a terrible human being. What makes the kind characters fascinating is how they react to horrible things. Aaron, if she ever needs legal counsel or spiritual counsel, I think she's coming to you for that. So, Paul asked, did you realize you never talked about currency in the Goblin Emperor before Celehar had to pay for something?
Yeah, because Maya has no money.
He's an emperor. He doesn't have to, right?
Yeah. Well, literally, he has no money when the book starts, because they're out there in the middle of nowhere. There's nothing to use money for. And he goes immediately to the court where he's the emperor. He doesn't need money. So yes.
He's like Bill Clinton. There's a guy to pay for his Big Mac somewhere in the entourage if he has to do it. Aaron also says, I still want to hear about Maya's aunt who is a sea captain.
Yes. If she wants to come tell me her story, I'm here and listening.
All right, the gauntlet is down there for that's the sea captain that's married to a woman too, right?
Yep. Correct.
I do read these books before I talk to you. All right, I may goof up the pronunciation on this one. The Melsuine books or the Shadow Unit episodes had a strong brother theme, but it doesn't show up in other books. Comment.
That's true. That in the Melusine books, it was their relationship to each other was the entire point of writing those 4 books, was Felix and Mildmay figuring out how to be brothers to each other. And Shadow Unit, that was more, that was less of an intentional thing and more just we had an idea for a character whose brother was infected by the anomaly, and that just ended up being how it was. But yes, Melusine is absolutely about the relationship between brothers.
And from what I know of reading your books, you're not the kind of person that writes cookie cutter books. You're getting around to many different things. There's an attendee who wants to know, what's your favorite underused trope in fantasy?
Underused trope.
Yeah. So it gives maybe one that deserves a little more use. Would it be a trope then if it was underused?
If it's underused, it's not a trope.
Yeah. Let's reframe that intention of that one. What are some aspects of fantasy you'd like to see more people develop?
I would like to see more people be weirder.
Weirder?
Weirder, yes. Because I think one of the great things about fantasy is that if you can imagine it, you can do it. And I think in a lot of ways the the genre has not really appreciated that as much as it could.
So here's where I can put in a plug for Jeff and Ann Vandermeer's big anthologies of weird. And by weirder, you mean that sort of
I
kind
mean,
of
sort of weird,
yeah.
but yes, the new weird among them.
Yeah, great. A reader also would like to know, Maya wonders once, and we never learn, the Emperor, is there an allowance for, and forgive me the pronunciation, the Nohicharis, his aides, to provide the Emperor some privacy for his needs?
That's a good question.
This is a family show, so I don't know how deep you can go into the answer for that. So.
I assume, given that there have been emperors for thousands of years and they have successfully handed down the succession, although not always from father to son, that somehow or another each emperor works these things out with his Nohicharis. But that was a question that Maya wondered about and then didn't want to find the answer to. So.
And you're such a romantic. You leave us dangling at the end of these stories of just that wonderful moment of retraction, like with Maya and his intended, and with other characters and other stories, and then our imagination needs to supply this part of the story that comes next. Beth wants to encourage your habits. I enjoy how different the things you write are, so please keep giving tour publicity overtime stress. That's why Desiree that gets the big bucks to help Katherine on that stuff. So,
yep.
Yes, thanks for the Boswell for bringing up the big book of modern fantasy. There's also the anthology, Daniel, called The Weird. That's a really tremendous anthology, and there's some Borges in there, and that's what Euless, as the god of death, mirrors, and dreams, says very Borgesian to me, because Borges had his creepy thing with mirrors. I wanted to make just one more comment to you, that besides enjoying reading Crows, I listened to the audiobook of Crows recently. I think it's Jenny Colgan was the narrator, or she was a wonderful narrator that does so many different voices and accents, and gave me a new life on that story. So. Daniel, you want to come back on with us?
Okay, now that I found The Weird, I can come back.
Yeah, no, well, you can't go wrong with really any anthology edited by the Vandermeers. They do a fantastic job, and they're such wide readers. Katherine, we really appreciate you taking time to talk with us. Any final thoughts as people are pressing that buy button over at Boswell to get a copy of your book?
No, just this one does have a sequel.
Woohoo! I don't think it's up yet on Index, so
no,
or I would link to that too. So just stay tuned.
It's not. There's a complete draft, but it's not finished.
Okay. So they can't get it tomorrow.
No.
No.
You will have to wait.
Well, it's we were just talking to a fellow Macmillan mystery writer, Ashley Weaver, who really likes unusual, like mysteries that cross genre. And so this is definitely on my list of books to recommend to her.
So is that going to be a table, Daniel? Mysteries that cross genre? Would that be a table there at Boswell?
It's a hard one. I had thought, in addition to this book, I had thought of Mary Robinette Kowal's Ghost Talker. Do you remember that one?
Yep.
Which is definitely, it's completely, it's a mystic fantasy science fiction book, but it's completely structured like it's not, it's structured like a mystery. So, because Weaver's book was kind of crossing mystery with the espionage genre, like not who's the killer, but who's the killer who's also a spy. So, but use some of the models of that. Bujold does mystery stuff too. Yes, that's true. It is a popular genre to cross.
Stanislaw Lem. You can put him in there too. Oh, Catherine,
Yes.
do you think people can read if they happen to get Witness first, read Witness first, and then go back and read Goblin without too much ill effect?
I would think so, yes.
I hope so, because I don't have a lot of we have Goblin in stock. I linked to that too. They should read Witness tonight, tomorrow.
I did do my best to make the Witness for the Dead not dependent on the Goblin Emperor. So
Great. Well,
as Aaron Rutherford said, they should read Witness yesterday. So.
I think Erin should be on your street team.
She might. They might be. So.
Yep.
Thank you both for a wonderful evening. Thanks everybody for coming. We wouldn't have a bookstore without you. Hope you can support our virtual event series by purchasing a copy of it. So if not from us, then from your favorite independent bookstore. We wouldn't mind if you told your favorite independent bookstore that Boswell told you to do it. So thank you both. Thank you, Tor. Have a wonderful evening.
Thank you, Sarah. Take care.